heard yesterday.
Yeah, I know.
Somewhat.
We're gonna lie.
Regular meeting of Amherst City Council will come to order. Roll call, Mr. Janik,
Here.
Mr. Goodell,
Here.
Mr. Van Turen,
Here.
Ms. Wasilk,
Here.
Mr. Winarski, Mr. Dembinski,
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Present.
Mr. Van Turen,
Move to excuse Mr. Winiarski as the letter on file.
Mr. Goodell. There's a motion and a second on the floor. Excuse Mr. Winarski from tonight's meeting as a letter on file. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Move on to item 2 and 3. We'll stand for the prayer by Chaplain Wasilk and remain standing for a pledge of the flag by Sergeant at Arms Dembinski.
Will you bow with me, please? Gracious God, bless this meeting tonight. Guide and direct all that goes on at this meeting. Tonight, we ask a special blessing on our former clerk, Linda Turley. We're grateful that you sent her our way and that she served the city so faithfully for the past 5.5 years. Bless her in the next step of her journey with her new career. We are also grateful that you have returned Olga Sabinski to us as our clerk of council. Bless her as she renews her oath of service and commitment to the citizens of Amherst. We are thankful for the gift of her talents. And now may the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Move on to item 4, June 9th, 2017. Dear Mr. Dietrich, thank you for the opportunity to serve the Amherst City Council for the last 5.5 years. I've enjoyed working with you in council. Unfortunately, I am giving you this resignation letter in order to take a full-time job. My last day will be today, June 9th, 2017. Sincerely, Linda Turley. So,
Mr. President, I move that we accept the resignation of Mrs. Turley.
thank you. Mr. Dembinski.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to accept the letter of resignation from Ms. Turley. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Move on to item 5, appointment of the new clerk of council. Ms. Wasilk.
I move that we appoint Olga Sabinski to the position of clerk of council.
Thank you. Mr. Dembinski.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to appoint Olga Sabinski as the new council clerk. Roll call vote, please. Yes.
Just a point of order. I guess I had a discussion with Mr. Loftman about this today, and the reappointment certainly is proper. However, there might be a need for a public hearing within 60 days of the intent to appoint Olga to the position. We may want to do a temporary
Appointment.
a temporary appointment, and then provide for that 60-day period before that she's actually appointed on a permanent basis. I discussed that with him today. I know that he had a conversation with Mr. Dietrich about this with Mr. Loftman when he informed you of his opinion, didn't realize it was for the actual clerk of council's position. And we had a further discussion about making sure that we do this properly, so there's no problems with that, because I know that was Mr. Dietrich's concern, make sure we dot the i's and cross the t's. So I will certainly lay on my sword in that regard that Mr. Loftman probably gave you incorrect information about the immediate appointment, and that we should, per chance, I would recommend the council we do a temporary appointment because we need someone for the position, and then we do a permanent appointment. We set out a date that we could come back 60 days so that we know for a date certain, count back 60 days and provide a public notice of the fact that we're reappointing a previously retired individual back into her position, again, who she is and what the position was, and then also have a hearing, a public hearing no later than 15 days before the permanent appointment. So anyone who as if they're going to object, but anyone who wants to discuss it can come in to address that. So I just wanted to, and I apologize, Mr. Dietrich, I wanted to tell you that. And I thought we were going to perhaps just do a temporary appointment and then go forward with the permanent
So
appointment.
what should the wording on the motion that I make be?
Just for a temporary appointment. What, Mr. Kukuza?
I just have a bookkeeping question in regards to that. Should they also include like salary and everything like that?
I would, just to
And
be
current rate.
To be
all that.
safe, I would include all that information.
Yeah, to assume current salary and benefits.
So,
In fact, this is to Mr.
Or
Dietrich.
not benefits.
Right. In fact, I would say that at this point, we could provide the public notice, or decide that we're going to provide the public notice with all of that information, and then set this matter for a permanent appointment 60 days beyond this notice, and then have an actual public hearing at least 15 days before that permanent appointment. So
okay.
you were provided information based on a different set of
Yeah.
facts, and Mr. Loftman corrected that, and I wanted to bring that to your attention. So,
Thank you.
sure.
So then motion should be just to temporarily appoint Olga Savinsky as council clerk
At the current
at the current
rate.
salary.
Right. Yes.
And also to make notice that there will be a public hearing.
I would think we need to separate that, so why don't we take
The
care of
second motion.
this temporary appointment.
All right,
So if you could, please,
Yes.
just separate the two.
all right,
Um,
all right. I move that we rescind my previous motion. And I move that we appoint Olga Savinsky to the position of clerk of council temporarily at the current rate of pay, and it will be for the next 60 days.
at least for the next 60
For at
days.
least the next 60 days.
Yes.
Okay.
That's fine.
Right.
Yes, because I don't want to mess up my PERS now that I'm retired. If we start doing this temporary things and that, it might affect things, and
No, that's why I'm saying
No.
that.
I think that's why
I'd like
Mr.
to-
Kukuk is.
okay.
That's why I think they have to make the motion that that your salary and everything are
Okay,
at the current setting of the past council clerk going
Okay.
forward for the temporary period, that everything goes with that during the temporary period.
okay.
Is that your motion, Mrs.?
Sort of.
Sort of. Mr. Dembinski.
I will also rescind my second from the previous motion, and then second the motion that Ms. Wasilla just did.
Okay. So there's a motion and a second on the floor to appoint Ms. Olga Savinsky, temporary council clerk, and advertise with the period within 60 days at the existing salary and benefits. Would that be right? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mrs. Vasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Motion carries. Congratulations.
Now, does
I
she
hope.
be sworn in?
You need to
Oh.
make another motion according to the law director about the 60 days.
I-
Is that a motion?
No.
We should have a second motion
Mhm.
that basically indicated the city will provide public notice of its intent to permanently appoint Ms. Savinsky as the clerk of courts and council, wrong job, clerk of council, and that so we need to set that out. I'm not sure what date we'll have to have that appointment. So within, at least 60 days, Mrs. Wassilk, at least 60 days. It gives us some time after if we could do 70 days or 75 days, depending on the calendar. Mr. Cook was indicating it's the 14th of August, so it'll be time period after that.
Okay.
Ms. Vasil.
I move that we publish a public notice of intent to appoint Mrs. Savinsky to the position permanently, and that we have do we need a public hearing? And then a public hearing occur
At least 15 days before that.
at least, okay, the public notice of the permanent appointment for the next 60 days. We public notice it.
Public notice occurring 15 days prior to the 60
And-
day expiration date.
And conduct a public hearing 15 days prior to the end of that public notice period.
Prior to the permanent appointment.
Prior to the permanent.
Yeah.
Mr. Goodell. Mr. Goodell seconds what she said. So. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mrs. Vasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Motion carries. Are we good to move on to item 6 now? The consent agenda.
Minutes of the regular council meeting held May 22nd, 2017. Minutes of the Streets Committee meeting held June 5th, 2017. Minutes of the Building and Lands Committee meeting held June 5th, 2017.
Mr. Van Turen.
Move to accept the consent agenda as read.
Mr. Miller.
Second, please.
Motion is second on the floor to accept the consent agenda as read. Any comments or questions? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mrs. Vasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Motion carries. Move on to item 7, acknowledgement of the public pertaining to items on tonight's agenda. Ms. Vasil.
Do we need to move to excuse Mr. Benarski?
We did.
Did
We
we?
already did.
We already did.
You were worried about those motions you had to make.
I guess. All right.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just one item I wanted to revisit since we're speaking about the appointment of new clerk of council. I'd like to take this moment to personally thank Linda, Ms. Turley, for all her efforts in the past 5.5 years. She's the one that I've worked with and I've known this whole time. She's been was amazing, did a great job. I think she served us in the city well. In addition to that, I'd like to welcome back Ms. Olga Savinsky for taking the time out of her day to come back and say, hey, let's do the Monday night thing again, and we appreciate that on short notice. So once again, thank you, Ms. Turley, and welcome back, Olga, in that position.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Now move on to item 8, ordinances and resolutions. First reading, item A.
An ordinance amending Amherst Codified Ordinance, Chapter 903.
Mr. Goodell.
Do we need to suspend, or can this go to the second reading?
Go second reading.
I would like to make motion to take item 8A to the second reading.
Mr. Dembinski.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to take item A onto the second reading. Are there any comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen? Mrs. Vasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Motion carries. Item B.
An ordinance amending Amherst Codified Ordinance, Part 13, Building Code, Title I, Standards, establishing new standards by adopting a new Chapter 1301 and by amending two chapters 1303, 1305, 1307, 1309, 1311, 1313, and 1315.
Mr. Goodell.
I'd like to make a motion to take item 8B onto the second reading.
Mr. Dembinski.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to take item B onto the second reading. Any comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mrs. Vasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Motion carries. Item C.
An ordinance amending Amherst Codified Ordinance, Chapter 919.
Mr. Miller.
Thanks, Mr. President. Move to take 8C on to the second reading.
Mr. Janik?
Second. Hold on.
Wait a minute.
It's been brought to our attention, we need to actually amend this. It pertains to our Amherst Codified Ordinance 9/1903, street lighting. We actually have some proposed language provided by the building department and as agreed upon by the law department. I'm not sure if that language was provided to the council or not.
No.
Okay.
Can we do it? We can do that in the second reading, can we?
Yes.
I guess we could. I mean,
We could, but it'd be kind of nice to just maybe briefly talk about it.
If I may, just briefly, the previous section, it pertains to street lighting. The previous section indicated that free street lighting shall be provided upon streetways, thoroughways, and roadways within the boundaries of the city. Such free street lighting shall be established, provided, and maintained by the city without cost to the freeholders or any resident of the city. The city shall pay the entire cost for the location, construction, or maintenance of such street lighting equipment without equivocation. Free street lighting shall be in effect while proprietorship of the electrical distribution system is vested or remains in the city. That, I think, was an ordinance passed in 1965, and certainly it's outdated and does not meet our needs or adequately reflects our obligations. And the proposed language would indicate, and we'll get this to you for the next reading, street lighting shall be provided upon streetways, thoroughways, and roadways within the boundaries of the city. The full cost of the construction and installation of street lighting, including all fixtures and equipment, shall be the responsibility of the property owner per the final development plan submission requirements as listed in Chapter 11-1408 contained herein, as provided by the Planning Commission and Council. The city shall assume the costs of maintaining such street lighting equipment without equivocation, while proprietorship of the electrical distribution system is vested or remains in the city upon the acceptance of the improvements pursuant to Chapter 11-1310 contained herein. So it's quite a shift, but we'll get you the language.
I mean, any reason it couldn't be amended?
I'd like to amend it tonight.
Just get it done, that way we can see it in real language. A building inspector is here if anybody had questions for him. Sorry, I didn't catch that.
That's right. Well, let's go on with item C and D, and then we'll come back to item A.
We're on item
This
C.
is on.
This is 8C.
This is C.
They want amended.
Oh, 8C. Yeah,
They want
8C.
8C.
C.
Oh, okay. That's the one we're
We're
oh, all right.
yeah.
Yeah.
The question just come up from several people how that read, and the building inspector was gracious enough to work on this for us at the last minute.
Mr. Miller?
Mr. President, I'll rescind my motion, and until I get something in front of me to read, I'm not going to put up a motion to move this to the second reading
Can I give you?
as amended. So,
Can we give you one real quick?
unless you're gonna give me some time to read it and take a look at it. If not, I'd be glad to pass it forward on the second reading. Same thing.
I have a question. Tony, would it be okay if we changed per in that very last sentence to pursuant to? Just because that becomes a problem per chapter 1, you know what I mean?
As per or pursuant, that's fine. That's not the substance, but we're talking about, sure, we clean up the verbiage of that language.
Are there more copies?
Where is that at? Where's per, as in per pursuant? Acceptance of improvements per chapter, pursuant to chapter is what you're referring to?
Yeah, get a copy.
I'll run and make a copy.
Or
as
just
well.
go ahead.
Well, you know, just since I have the floor and haven't turned it over, why don't we just amend this in the second reading and move it forward? I don't know why
That's fine.
we're doing this haphazardly.
Yeah, we're going
the way
3
doing it.
readings with it anyway, so it
We're
doesn't
gonna
make
go
any
3 readings,
difference.
let us take a look at it, let's do it the right way.
That's fine, I agree with Mr. McGuire.
Yeah, there's no reason to go back. I mean,
I'll copy this for tomorrow
Yes.
and put it in the other one's mailboxes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so the motion is to pass it on to second reading.
Mhm.
And Mr. Janik, do you want to remove your second, and Mr. Miller remove your motion and make
Yes,
it
please.
that you're going to amend it? Okay.
I'm just going to keep the motion. I'll be glad to keep 8C moving on to the second reading as written, as provided. If we have a second on that and we want to move it to the second reading, we can amend it there. I would be fine with that.
I'm sorry, so you want to amend it on the second reading, in other words?
I would be willing to amend it and support the amendment of that on the second reading after sitting down with it and reading it and asking questions. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Janik?
I'll leave my motion as well.
Okay. Motion and second on the floor to pass item C on to the second reading. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mrs. Vasilk? Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Motion carries. Item D,
An ordinance amending Amherst Codified Ordinances, Chapters 1331, 1336, and 1337.
Mr.
I'd like to make a motion to take item 8D to the second reading.
Mr. Miller?
Second, please.
Motion and second on the floor to take item D onto the second reading. Any comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mrs. Vasilk? Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Motion carries. Completes item 8. Move on to item 9. Ordinances and resolutions, second reading. We have none. Move on to item 10. Ordinances and resolutions, third reading. Item A.
An ordinance authorizing the increase in appropriations for refunds and reimbursements, account 610-5003-52730.
Mr. Miller?
Move to adopt, please.
Mr.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to adopt. Roll call vote.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mrs. Vasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Motion carries.
It would be ordinance 01725.
Completes item 19. Move on to item 11, miscellaneous acknowledgement of the public. Anyone here wishing to speak on any item?
We have the
Yeah. We have a liquor license transfer.
There's a liquor license transfer, and it's from Heart of Amherst LLC at 979 North Levitt Road in Amherst, Ohio, to NIGU Investments LLC, and the address stays the same. This is simply a change of name.
Just for information. Mr. Miller?
We have a copy of that?
Yeah, we can get your copy.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Where is that?
I think that's the Sunoco station.
On the corner?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry I didn't have time to check into it since I just received it, so. But I will make copies for
Thank you
everyone
very
for
much.
tomorrow.
I think that particular entity may have some issue that we may need to talk about. Then I'll have to talk to the water director to see what we need to do, or if that might be applicable here.
Well, there's a lot more to it if you want to, complain about it. I mean, if we do file something against it, it's very complicated. I mean,
Yeah, we had this discussion, I don't know what we're discussing, I mean, I know the issue, but I don't know what facts Mr. Ramsey's alluding to.
We might have to talk about it in an executive session due to privacy. I don't know, you know what I'm saying? I don't know yet, that's why I want to talk with you about it.
Wow.
This is just the first I've heard of
okay.
this application, so I'm just saying there may be an issue with that particular location that I'd like to talk with maybe the law director about, and if there's an issue, maybe we'll bring it back up. But
Okay.
just,
All right.
don't just
This,
rubber stamp it yet.
they want response by July 7th, so I'll just put this back on the next, I'll have it on the next agenda.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Ramsey. Anyone else?
Well, I can't see.
What?
I'll talk later about it.
Anyone else? If not, we'll move on to agenda requests and committee meeting schedules.
I have one item, Mr. President, and that is to finance a 1733 resolution for 2018 tax budget with emergency clause. The tax budget is due at the county by July 20th, 2017.
Thank you. Finance, Ms. Basil?
I have one item. A 17-33, the resolution for 2018 budget with the emergency, and I would like to call that for this coming Monday, the 19th at 7 p.m.
Thank you. Building and Lands, Mr. Janik?
No items, Mr. President, please cancel.
Thank you. Streets, Mr. Dembitsky?
No items, Mr. President, please cancel.
Thank you. Community Development, Mr. Goodell?
Nothing at this time, Mr. President, please cancel.
Thank you. Executive, Mr. Van Turen?
No items, Mr. President, please cancel.
Thank you. Ordinance, Mr. Miller?
No items, please cancel.
Thank you. Utilities, Mr. Janik?
No items, Mr. President, please cancel.
Thank you. Recycle, Mr. Miller?
Just an announcement, the craziness of the week. We have a huge change. There are dumpsters out on Mondays and Tuesdays when they're all supposed to be on Wednesday. And if that hasn't been seen on Facebook, you don't have Facebook. 'Cause, that's been all out, and there has been some confusion. And recycle, waste, bulk, all on Wednesday here in the city limits of Amherst. And if there's any other questions, please call Republic Services. Thank you. No items for the committees. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Technology, Mr. Dembitsky?
No items, Mr. President, please cancel.
Thank you. Police and Fire, Mr. Miller?
No items. Please cancel, Mr. President.
Thank you. That completes item 12. Move on, item 13, Reports Administration.
Thank you. Mr. Kukuka?
Yeah, several things. Our audit is finishing up. They will hopefully be getting the report completed to get it submitted to the state. And again, it's up to the state to weed through all different audits, so we don't know when it will come back. We'll submit it to council. The reports for the month of May have been distributed, and everything is complete in that way. And the report was
Thank you. Mr. Ramsey?
Our reports have been distributed as well, and maybe I should mention that, Carol, Ms. Harper, did you get your, we now included you on that as you requested. So we've now included the Morning Journal. We're copying them on the same reports that we provide. So, did you get it?
I got it once.
Yeah, just, I think just since, it's been the one report since we added you to the list. So, if you need anything else, you can call the office. That's it. End of my report.
Thank you. Mr. Pecora?
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Jeffries?
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Have one item. We did open the bids for our street paving program, our resurfacing, and the bids, there were 3 of them, and one bid came in extremely good to the city's favor, probably 20% lower than the others. So because of the way council was so graciously able to pass the street program in somewhat of a generic fashion, which didn't completely name all the streets, we're able to take those quantities and add 20% more to our street paving program this year. So we'll get a couple more streets paved, and even on top of the $80,000 extra. So this is going to be a pretty significant year for street paving. And we should award that Friday to the company, and hopefully very soon get started. Kresge Drive and the Elyria Avenue will be a bid out very soon, two different programs. In the report, unless there's questions.
Who was the bid?
It was a Precision Paving.
Thank you. No other questions?
You're welcome. In the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any questions? All those in favor, accept the reports of administration. Mr. Miller?
I was going to make that motion to accept. I didn't know if anybody else did. If not, move to accept reports of administration.
Thank you. Mr. Dembitsky?
I'll second that.
Motion is second on the floor. Accept the reports of administration. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? They are accepted. Item 14. Let's see, acknowledgement of Ms. Silk.
I move that we acknowledge the report from the auditor and treasurer.
Thank you. Mr. Goodell?
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to acknowledge the reports from the auditor and the treasurer.
Second that, I'm sorry.
Mr. Goodell.
Goodell. Sorry, thank you.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mrs. Vasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Reports are accepted. Move on to item 15. Mr. Miller?
Move to adjourn, please.
Mr. Goodell? Motion is second on the floor to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed are adjourned at 7:33.
Council members, please forgive me that I didn't make copies of the liquor permit. Linda told me that she doesn't put it on the agenda anymore, or that she copies it, so that's why I didn't, but it will be from now on. Sorry about that.
What's that?
Not a big deal.
Well, it is because